The alarm hits before I even open my eyes. Red light floods the bunk room on the Halden Star, and I am on my feet before my brain catches up with my body. Around me, my squad is already moving, pulling on gear, checking rifles, saying nothing because there is nothing to say. We have done this 100 times. This time feels different. My name is Daniel Cole. I am a corporal in the Earth Defense Auxiliary, stationed on Kessia Outpost, a border world that belongs to nobody and everybody at the same time. We are here because of a treaty. The Korath Assembly, a group of advanced alien nations, asked for soldiers to help guard this stretch of space, and Earth said yes, because saying yes to powerful allies is how a small, new species survives in a galaxy full of old ones. I run down the corridor and reach the command deck, where Captain Laura Bennett is already staring at the main screen, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "Report," she says, not looking away from the display. "Unknown contacts, ma'am." "A lot of them," says Ethan Brooks, our sensor officer, his voice tight. "They came out of nowhere. No warning beacon, no signature match." I step closer to the screen. Hundreds of small dots are moving toward the outpost in a pattern that makes my stomach turn. It is not a formation. It is not organized like a fleet. It looks alive, like a swarm of insects flying toward a light. "Alliance Command has been notified," says Nina Patel, our communications officer. "They are asking us to hold position until reinforcements arrive." Captain Bennett finally turns to look at me. "Cole, get your team to the outer defense line. Whatever this is, we buy time." I nod and move, because that is the job. I do not know yet that within the hour, everything I believe about who the real monsters are in this galaxy is going to be turned upside down. Outside, the sky over Kessia Outpost is a strange shade of orange, lit by two suns that never fully set. My team, 5 of us, take position along the outer trench line, a shallow defensive ditch reinforced with plated barriers. We can see the Korath fleet above us, dozens of tall silver warships hanging in orbit like silent judges. They are beautiful ships, built for elegance as much as war. But right now, elegance will not save us. "Movement," says Marcus Webb beside me, his voice low. He points toward the tree line beyond the outpost fence. Something is moving through the shadows, fast and low, and my throat goes dry. Then the first shots come from the Korath ships above, streaks of blue energy lancing down toward the swarm approaching from orbit. For a moment, I feel relief. The assembly fleet is engaging. Maybe this will be over quickly. It is not. The swarm does not slow down. If anything, it moves faster, splitting apart and reforming, flowing around the energy blasts like water around stones. My earpiece crackles with panicked voices from the Korath command channel, voices I can partly understand through my translator implant. "They are not stopping," one alien officer says. "Formation is breaking. Pull back the outer picket." Pull back, already, and the fight has barely started. Nina's voice comes through our own channel, sharp, urgent. "Cole, Alliance Command wants confirmation. Are the reinforcements they requested from Earth in position?" I frown. "Reinforcements? I thought the assembly fleet was our reinforcement." "No," she says. "Apparently the assembly asked for backup hours ago, before this even started. They expected more of their own ships. Instead, High Command routed the closest available force." "Which is?" There is a pause, and even through the static, I can hear something like disbelief in her voice. "Us. A relief wing from Earth. 6 ships. They are inbound now." I almost laugh, except nothing about this moment is funny. 6 ships, against however many alien species could have answered that call, and the one that shows up is us. I picture the Korath commanders reading that report and feeling their hearts sink. Humanity, still young to this whole galactic community, still viewed by most of the old species as clever but limited, stubborn but small. Now we are their reinforcements. Above us, a Korath cruiser breaks formation, retreating toward the far side of the planet, its captain unwilling to risk his ship further. I watch through my scope as smaller assembly craft do the same, pulling back in tight, disciplined patterns, following some doctrine that values the ship over the fight. The swarm keeps coming. My earpiece buzzes again. Cole, this is Bennett. Human Relief Wing has entered the system. Small craft, but they are not holding back. Watch your sensors. This is about to get loud. I look up just in time to see 6 shapes streak across the sky, engines burning bright orange against the dim atmosphere. They are nothing like the Korath ships. No elegance, no grace, just blunt, fast, built for one purpose. They dive straight into the swarm without slowing down, weapons already firing. For a moment, the Korath channel goes quiet. Then one voice, an alien commander named Selin Vray, speaks with something between confusion and disbelief. They are engaging directly. No standoff distance, no caution. That is not caution, Marcus mutters beside me, watching the same feed. That is just how we fight. The ground shakes as debris rains down near the outer fence. Pieces of swarm creatures, dark and twisted, falling like burning leaves. I duck behind the barrier, my rifle raised, waiting for whatever comes next. Through the smoke, I see the first of them up close for the first time, a shape roughly the size of a large dog, covered in dark plating, moving on too many limbs, its motion smooth and horribly efficient. Contact, I call out, and my team opens fire. The next several minutes blur together, the kind of blur that only happens when your body takes over, because your mind cannot process fast enough. We hold the line. We fall back a little. We hold again. Above us, the small human ships weave through the swarm in ways that should not be possible, taking hits, losing pieces of their hulls, but never turning away. Then, as quickly as it began, the swarm pulls back. Not defeated, not destroyed, just gone, retreating into the dark beyond the outpost's sensor range, leaving behind wreckage and silence and the ringing in my ears. I lower my rifle slowly, breathing hard, my hands shaking despite myself. Marcus looks at me, his face pale under the dirt. "That was not the whole force," he says quietly. "That was a taste." Above us, one of the human relief ships hangs in the sky, damaged but steady, its hull scorched black in places. On the Korath command channel, I hear voices speaking quickly in their own language, then switching to the shared translation frequency, and what I hear surprises me. "Confirm status of the human wing," Selin Vray says. "They took heavy damage. Why did they not retreat when the numbers turned against them?" Nina answers through our own channel, quoting the reply from the human fleet commander word for word. "Because retreating would have left your outpost undefended, and there are people down there." Silence follows that answer, a long, strange silence that stretches across 2 very different fleets. I look toward the horizon, where the swarm disappeared, and something cold settles in my chest. That was not an invasion. That was a scout, a test, a single hand reaching out to feel how hard we would push back. Somewhere out there, whatever sent this swarm now knows exactly how humanity fights. I do not know yet that this is only the beginning of a much larger and much darker truth, one that has nothing to do with the swarm at all, and everything to do with the choices the Korath Assembly is about to make when the real invasion arrives, and with what the people who called for help are willing to do once help actually comes. For now, I kneel in the trench, catch my breath, and watch the sky, waiting for the next wave, because somewhere deep down, I already know it is coming. The silence after the swarm's retreat does not last long. Within minutes, the outpost's medical teams move through the trench lines, and I finally get a clear look at the cost of those few minutes of fighting. 3 of our own soldiers are down, not dead, but badly hurt, and 2 Korath escort craft did not make it back to orbit. Above us, the human relief wing regroups, their damaged hulls glowing faintly where automated repair systems try to patch the worst of the wounds. Captain Bennett calls my team back to the command deck for a briefing, and I walk through the outpost corridors past rows of frightened outpost workers, most of them Korath civilians who came here to study this border region, never expecting to see real combat. Their eyes follow us as we pass, wide and uncertain, and I realize something that makes my chest tighten. To them, we are the strange ones now, the small, aggressive species that flew straight into danger without hesitation. On the command deck, the main screen shows a live feed from Selen Vray's flagship, the Orient Vale, hanging in high orbit. Vray himself appears on screen, tall even for a Korath, with pale blue skin and calm, calculating eyes that give away nothing. "Captain Bennett," he says, his translated voice smooth and formal, "your relief wing performed admirably. We did not expect such an aggressive response from so small a force." Bennett keeps her expression neutral. "We do what the situation requires, Commander." "Indeed," Vray says, and something in his tone makes me uneasy, though I cannot place why. "We are recalling our main fleet to a defensive position around the outpost's northern sector. I would ask that your human wing hold the southern perimeter until additional assembly forces arrive." Bennett glances at Nina, who nods, confirming the transmission is genuine. "Understood, Commander. We will hold." The screen goes dark, and for a moment nobody speaks. Then Marcus, standing near the back of the room, breaks the silence. "Did anyone else notice he did not thank us?" Bennett allows herself a small, tired smile. "That is not how the assembly works, Corporal. Gratitude implies a debt. Debts imply obligation. The old species do not like owing anything to anyone, especially not to us." I think about that as we head back toward the defense line, my boots crunching over scorched ground. It strikes me as strange, the idea that pride could matter more than survival, but I remind myself that the Korath have been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. We have been part of it for less than 1 century. To them, we are new, unpredictable, useful but not yet trusted. That trust, or the lack of it, becomes very clear over the following hours. As the outpost prepares for a second wave, I am assigned to help coordinate supply movement between the human relief ships and the ground defense teams. It is during this work that I first meet Captain Julia Marsh, commander of the lead relief ship, the Farron Hope. She is younger than I expected, with short dark hair and a calm, steady voice that carries easily over the noise of loading equipment. "Corporal Cole," she says, extending a hand as I approach with a resupply manifest. "Heard your team held the trench line well." "We did what we could," I say. "Your wing hit that swarm harder than anyone expected." She allows a tired half smile. "We did not have much choice. Command back home made it clear, if the assembly calls for help and we do not answer fully, we lose whatever standing we have built so far. Earth cannot afford to look weak in front of species this old." I nod, understanding the pressure, even if I do not like it. Doesn't feel like they respect the effort much. Julia's smile fades slightly. Respect takes longer than one battle, Cole, but fear, that comes faster. Her words stay with me as I return to the trench line, carrying extra ammunition crates through the dust. Fear. I had not thought of it that way, but watching the reaction on the Korath command channel earlier, the surprise, the unease in Selen Vray's voice, I begin to understand what she means. The assembly did not expect humans to fight the way we do, without hesitation, without careful calculation of acceptable losses. To them, it must look almost reckless, maybe even a little frightening. As the sun begins to dip behind the eastern ridge, painting the sky in deep orange and violet, sensor alarms sound again across the outpost. This time, the warning is different, sharper, more urgent. Multiple contacts, larger than before, Ethan calls out from the sensor station as I rush back to the command deck. This is not the same swarm. Signature is different, denser, and there are far more of them. Bennett studies the screen, her expression hardening. "How many?" Ethan hesitates before answering. Sensors estimate over 3,000 individual signatures, moving in coordinated formation. "Captain, this does not look like a scouting party anymore." The room goes quiet, except for the low hum of equipment. I feel a chill settle over me, the same cold weight I felt earlier when I first realized the scout wave had only been a test. Nina's comm channel crackles to life, carrying an urgent transmission from Selen Vray's flagship. His voice is different now, faster, less composed than before. Captain Bennett, this is Commander Vray. Assembly Council has ordered a strategic reassessment of this sector's defense priority. Bennett's eyes narrow. Meaning what? Exactly, Commander. There is a pause before Vray answers, and in that pause I hear something that makes my stomach drop. Hesitation. Meaning the Council is considering a full withdrawal of Assembly forces from Kessia Outpost in order to preserve fleet strength for defense of core Assembly worlds. For a moment, nobody in the command deck moves. Then Bennett steps closer to the comm panel, her voice hard and controlled. Commander, there are over 4,000 civilians on this outpost, human and Korath both. Withdrawal now means leaving them defenseless against a force 3,000 strong. Vray's reply comes slower this time, careful, almost apologetic in tone, though the words themselves carry no real apology. The Council understands the cost, Captain, but the mathematics of the situation are clear. Preserving the fleet ensures the survival of a greater number of Assembly citizens across the sector. Individual outposts, however tragic their loss, must sometimes be sacrificed for the larger strategy. I feel something twist inside me, a mix of anger and disbelief. I glance around the command deck and see the same expression mirrored on the faces of my squad. Marcus, Nina, even the usually calm Ethan, all of them staring at the comm panel as if it just confirmed something none of us wanted to believe. Bennett's jaw tightens, but her voice stays level. Commander Vray, are you ordering the Human Relief Wing to withdraw as well? Another pause. The Council extends the same recommendation to your forces, Captain. Your assistance so far has been noted and will be reported favorably. But this is no longer a battle your small wing can meaningfully affect. The line goes quiet, the transmission ending without further explanation. Bennett stands still for a long moment, staring at the now blank screen, and I realize this is the moment that will decide everything that follows. She turns to face the room, and her voice, when she speaks, carries a weight I have never heard from her before. Get me a direct line to Captain Marsh, she says, and pull up everything we have on that outpost's civilian shelters. Nina blinks. Captain, if the Assembly fleet withdraws, we would be facing 3,000 of those creatures, with 6 ships and a few dozen ground troops. Bennett nods slowly. I am aware of the numbers, Lieutenant. Then what's the plan? Marcus asks, his voice quiet. Bennett looks around the room, meeting each of our eyes in turn before answering, and her words settle over the command deck like a decision already made. The plan is, we do not leave people behind. Not today. Not ever. I feel my pulse quicken, not with fear this time, but with something closer to grim determination. Outside, the sky continues to darken, and somewhere beyond the horizon, 3,000 unknown enemies are moving closer with every passing minute. But for the first time since this crisis began, I understand clearly what side of this fight truly matters, and it has very little to do with which species is older, or more advanced, or more respected among the stars. It has everything to do with who is willing to stay when staying costs everything. And as Bennett begins issuing orders, preparing our small, stubborn wing to hold a line the Assembly itself is ready to abandon, I realize the true test of this battle has not even begun yet. The swarm outside the walls is dangerous, yes, deadly, relentless, growing in numbers with every passing hour. But the coldness I heard in Commander Vray's voice, the calm, practiced ease with which he spoke of sacrificing thousands of lives for strategic convenience, that unsettles me far more than anything the swarm has shown so far. Because monsters, I am beginning to understand, do not always come with claws and too many limbs. Sometimes they come wearing calm voices and careful diplomatic language, deciding who lives and who dies as if reading numbers off a ledger. And as the last light fades over Kessia Outpost, I find myself wondering which enemy we will truly have to face before this night is over. Word of the Assembly's decision spreads through the outpost faster than any official announcement could manage. By the time I return to the trench line with fresh supplies, the ground crews already know, their faces pale under the dim emergency lighting strung along the defense perimeter. A young Korath technician named Osa Rel stops me near the supply depot, her hands trembling slightly as she speaks. "Is it true?" she asks, her translator device carrying a raw edge of fear through its otherwise smooth voice. "The Council fleet is leaving us here?" I hesitate, unsure how much I am allowed to share, but the fear in her eyes makes the decision for me. "Our wing is staying," I tell her. "Captain Bennett is not pulling out." Relief floods her expression, followed quickly by confusion. "But your forces are so few. Why would you stay when your own council would not?" I think about Julia Marsh's words from earlier, about fear taking less time to earn than respect, and I realize now there is something else layered beneath that truth, something simpler and harder to explain in careful diplomatic language. "Because leaving isn't something we're built to do," I say finally, and though the words feel plain, I watch them land on her with real weight. Back at the command deck, preparations move quickly. Bennett has already reached Captain Marsh, and the two of them stand together at the central display, mapping out defensive positions across the outpost's perimeter. The plan takes shape fast, 6 human ships providing orbital cover, ground teams reinforcing key structural points, and civilian shelters consolidated into the outpost's deepest, most defensible sections. "We won't win a straight fight against 3,000 of those things," Marsh says, tracing a finger along the projected battle lines. "But we don't need to win outright. We need to hold long enough for actual assembly reinforcements, real ones, to arrive." Bennett nods. "Nina, what's our timeline on outside support?" Nina checks her console, frowning at the results. Earth Defense Command is redirecting 2 additional wings, but they're still 11 hours out. Nearest assembly reinforcement fleet, assuming they even respond given the Council's current position, is 14 hours. The room falls quiet at that. 11 hours. Against 3,000 hostiles, with 6 damaged ships and a few dozen exhausted troops standing between them and thousands of civilians. "Then we hold 11 hours, Bennett says simply, as if the math did not matter at all, and for a moment, I feel something strange settle in my chest. Not confidence exactly, but something close to it, a kind of steady resolve that seems to be spreading through every person still standing on this outpost. As the final hour before nightfall passes, I find myself back on the outer trench line, checking equipment alongside Marcus and Ethan. The sky above has turned a deep, bruised purple, the 2 suns fully set now, leaving only the pale light of the outpost's defense towers to cut through the growing darkness. "You really think we can hold this?" Ethan asks quietly, checking the charge on his rifle for what must be the 3rd time. Marcus shrugs, though his eyes stay fixed on the tree line beyond the fence. "Doesn't matter if we think we can. We're going to try anyway." I almost smile at that, because it captures something true about all of this, something I am not sure the Korath, even now, fully understand about us. It is not that we believe we will always win. It is that giving up before the fight has ended was never really an option worth considering. The first warning comes just after full dark, a low tone from the perimeter sensors, followed quickly by Ethan's voice, tight and urgent. "Contact, north tree line, moving fast." I raise my rifle, peering through the scope toward the distant shadows. At first there is nothing but darkness, but then I see it. Movement, low and fast, dozens of shapes emerging from the tree line, then hundreds, their dark forms barely visible against the night sky except for a faint, pulsing glow along their backs, some kind of bioluminescent marking that seems to pulse in rhythm, as if the entire swarm shares a single heartbeat. "Here they come," Bennett's voice says over the comm, steady, despite the scale of what is approaching. "Hold the line. Wait for my mark." I settle into position, my breathing slow and controlled despite the tension coiling through my body. Beside me, Marcus does the same, and further down the trench, I can see the rest of my squad doing the same, weapons raised, eyes fixed on the approaching wave. Above us, the 6 human ships begin their first firing run, streaking low over the tree line, their weapons cutting bright lines through the darkness. The swarm's front ranks scatter and reform almost instantly, flowing around the attack like smoke, and I realize with a cold certainty that these creatures learn fast, faster than anything I have faced before. "Mark?" Bennett calls out, and the trench line opens fire together, a wall of light and sound erupting along the perimeter. The first ranks of the swarm fall, but more simply climb over the fallen, pressing forward without hesitation, without fear, driven by whatever instinct or command guides their collective movement. The fighting that follows blurs into a haze of noise, light, and motion. I lose track of time, aware only of the rhythm of firing, reloading, watching Marcus's back while he watches mine, listening to Bennett's calm, steady voice directing the defense from the command deck. Above us, the human ships weave through the chaos, their pilots pushing every system past safe limits to keep the swarm from overwhelming the ground defense. At some point, a section of the trench line begins to buckle under the sheer weight of numbers, and I hear Nina's voice cut through the comm channel, sharp with urgency. Eastern perimeter is failing. They're pushing through the gap near Shelter 4. Shelter 4. My chest tightens, because I know exactly what is housed there. Nearly 600 civilians, Korath and human both, sheltering in what was supposed to be the outpost's safest structure. "Cole, Webb, with me," Bennett's voice orders, and I am moving before I even realize it, sprinting along the trench line toward the failing section, Marcus close behind me. We arrive to find the defense line thin and stretched, a handful of soldiers fighting desperately to hold a growing breach in the perimeter fence. Beyond them, dozens of swarm creatures pour through the gap, moving with terrifying speed toward the shelter beyond. "Fall back to the shelter entrance," Bennett orders, already moving to reinforce the position. "We hold there. We do not let them through." What follows is the hardest stretch of fighting I have ever experienced. A desperate, close defense at the shelter entrance, every shot counted, every position held through sheer stubbornness rather than any clear tactical advantage. At one point, Julia Marsh's voice crackles over the comm, her ship diving low enough to provide covering fire almost directly overhead, close enough that I can feel the heat of her weapon systems even from the ground. Slowly, agonizingly, the breach begins to close. The swarm, faced with concentrated resistance at the shelter entrance, begins to shift its focus elsewhere, probing for weaker points along the perimeter instead. It is not victory, not yet, but it is enough. Enough to keep the shelter secure, enough to keep 600 people alive for one more hour. As the immediate pressure eases, I lean against the shelter wall, breathing hard, my hands aching from gripping my weapon so tightly. Marcus drops down beside me, equally exhausted, and for a moment, neither of us speaks. "How long have we been fighting?" I finally ask. Marcus checks his wrist display, then lets out a short, humorless laugh. 3 hours. 3 hours. 8 more to go before Earth reinforcements arrive. Longer still if the assembly fleet never returns at all. I close my eyes for just a moment, allowing myself a single breath of stillness before the next wave inevitably comes. That is when Nina's voice returns over the comm, and something in her tone makes my eyes snap open immediately. "Captain Bennett, you need to see this," she says. "We're picking up new signals, and they're not coming from the swarm." I share a glance with Marcus, both of us pushing exhausted bodies back to their feet, because whatever this new development is, something tells me our night is far from over. The signal Nina detected turns out to be a set of encrypted transmissions moving between several points across the outpost, patterns that do not match assembly military protocol or human communication standards. When Bennett and the command team finally manage to decode a fragment of the transmissions, the truth behind it sends a different kind of chill through the group than anything the swarm has caused so far. The signals are coming from within the outpost itself, from a small group of Korath researchers stationed in the science wing. Individuals who, according to the decoded fragments, have been secretly monitoring the swarm's movement patterns for months, long before this attack ever began. Buried within their communications is a detail that changes everything. A reference to an old classified assembly project, something called the Varan Initiative, an experiment involving controlled exposure to swarm biology, conducted decades ago on a since-abandoned outpost not far from this very system. Bennett studies the decoded information with a hard, unreadable expression before finally speaking. "They knew," she says quietly. "The Council didn't send help because they were caught off guard. They knew this swarm's presence was tied to something they created, or at least something they allowed to happen. The weight of that realization settles over the command deck like a physical thing. It is one matter to face an unknown, uncontrollable threat from the depths of space. It is another entirely to learn that the true origin of tonight's suffering may trace back to careless, or perhaps deliberate, decisions made by the very species that abandoned this outpost rather than face the consequences of its own past." I think of Selin Vray's calm, careful voice explaining the mathematics of sacrifice, and a new, colder understanding settles over me. Perhaps the swarm outside the walls is simply following instinct, hunger, whatever base drive controls its relentless advance. But the true monsters, the ones capable of true cruelty, might not be creatures with too many limbs and pulsing biological markings at all. They might be the ones who knew the danger all along and chose silence and self-preservation over honesty and sacrifice. As Bennett orders a full investigation into the Science Wing transmissions, even while the swarm continues its assault outside, I realize this long, brutal night has only begun to reveal its darkest secrets, and that whatever remains of it will demand more from all of us than any of us yet understand. The hours that follow blur into a relentless rhythm of attack, retreat, and desperate reinforcement. Each time the swarm probes a new section of the perimeter, our combined forces manage to hold, though every hour costs us dearly. By the time the first hint of dawn begins to color the eastern sky, our numbers have thinned considerably, and exhaustion weighs on every soldier still standing along the defense line. It is during this final stretch before sunrise that the true scale of the swarm's coordination becomes horribly clear. Rather than continuing scattered, probing attacks, the remaining creatures begin to organize into a single, massive formation, moving with unified purpose toward the outpost's central command structure, the one location that, if lost, would collapse the entire defense effort. "They're not testing anymore," Ethan reports from the sensor station, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous strain. "This is a direct assault on command." Bennett's expression hardens with grim determination. "Then we make our stand here." What follows is the most intense fighting of the entire night. Every remaining soldier, every functioning weapon system, every ounce of remaining strength thrown into holding a single, desperate line around the command structure. Julia Marsh brings her damaged ship low enough to provide direct support, her weapon systems firing well past their safety limits, buying precious minutes even as her own vessel begins showing signs of critical strain. I find myself standing alongside Marcus, Nina, and the last remnants of our original squad, forming a final defensive ring around the command entrance, watching wave after wave of the swarm break against our position, each wave slightly weaker than the last, though the difference feels agonizingly small from where I stand. Then, just as exhaustion threatens to overwhelm what remains of our defense, a new set of signals appears on Nina's console, distant at first, then rapidly growing stronger. "Multiple contacts. Incoming," she calls out, her voice cracking with something between exhaustion and disbelief. "Captain, it's the Earth Reinforcement Wing. They're early." Above us, streaks of light appear on the horizon, growing brighter with each passing second, until finally, a full formation of human ships breaks through the dawn sky, weapons already engaging the remaining swarm formations with overwhelming, coordinated force. The battle that follows is short compared to the long night that preceded it, the fresh reinforcement wing sweeping through the weakened swarm with efficient, devastating precision. Within 20 minutes, The remaining creatures scatter, retreating back toward whatever origin point they came from, leaving behind a battlefield scarred, but finally, blessedly quiet. I lower my weapon slowly, my body trembling with exhaustion, and look around at what remains of our defense line. Marcus stands beside me, equally drained, his uniform torn and scorched but his eyes steady. Further along the perimeter, Nina helps support an injured Korath soldier, while Bennett stands near the command entrance, watching the retreating swarm with an expression that carries more sorrow than triumph. As the sun finally rises fully over Kessia Outpost, painting the battlefield in soft, golden light that feels almost cruel against the scarred ground and shattered structures, Julia Marsh's voice comes through the comm, tired but steady. "Ground teams, this is Marsh. Swarm forces have withdrawn from the system entirely. I think it's over." A quiet murmur of relief spreads through the surviving defenders, though nobody quite manages a full celebration. Not yet, not with so many losses still fresh and unspoken. I find myself simply standing still for a long moment, breathing in the cool morning air, allowing myself to fully register that we survived, that the shelter held, that 600 civilians who could have been lost instead lived to see this sunrise. Later that day, as recovery efforts begin across the outpost, Bennett calls a meeting between the surviving human command staff and what remains of the outpost's Korath leadership. Selen Vray, having received reports of the outpost's survival despite the council's withdrawal order, arrives in person, his expression carrying none of the calm, practiced ease from the previous evening. "Captain Bennett," he begins, standing stiffly before the gathered group, "the council has asked me to convey their acknowledgement of your wing's actions." Bennett meets his gaze evenly. "Acknowledgement, that's all?" Vray hesitates, and for the first time since I have known him, something like genuine discomfort crosses his features. The council's decision to withdraw was made under significant strategic pressure. I want you to understand that decision was not made lightly. 600 civilians in Shelter 4 would disagree, Bennett replies, her voice quiet but firm, as would every soldier who held that line when your fleet chose to leave. Vray is silent for a long moment before finally speaking again, his voice lower now, more measured. "I have served the Council for many years, Captain. I have followed their strategic doctrine because I believed it protected the greatest number of lives possible. Tonight, watching your forces hold a line my own fleet abandoned, I find myself questioning whether that doctrine truly serves the purpose I always believed it did." Nobody responds immediately to that admission, and I find myself watching Vray closely, searching for any sign of insincerity, any hint that this is simply careful diplomatic language meant to smooth over an uncomfortable situation. But what I see instead is something closer to genuine reflection, an old, experienced commander confronting an uncomfortable truth about the doctrine he has served his entire career. "There is something else," Vray continues, his tone shifting slightly. "The transmissions your team intercepted last night, regarding the Varen initiative, I have requested a full council inquiry into that program's history and its potential connection to tonight's attack." Bennett's eyes narrow slightly. "And if that inquiry confirms the council's own past actions contributed to this swarm's existence?" Vray meets her gaze steadily. "Then the council will face consequences it has avoided for far too long." As the meeting concludes and the group begins to disperse, I find myself standing near the outpost's damaged perimeter fence, looking out over the scorched battlefield beyond, thinking about everything the past day has revealed. The swarm, dangerous and relentless as it was, now feels almost simple compared to the deeper, more troubling truths uncovered alongside it, truths about calculated sacrifice, about buried secrets, about the difference between strength that protects and strength that merely calculates acceptable losses. Julia Marsh finds me there a short while later, her uniform still scorched from the previous night's fighting, though her expression carries a quiet, tired satisfaction. "Heard you held the shelter line personally," she says, stepping up beside me. I nod, still watching the horizon. "Wasn't just me." Wasn't just any one person, really. She smiles slightly at that. That's usually how it works, isn't it? We stand together in comfortable silence for a while, watching outpost recovery teams begin the slow work of rebuilding what the night's battle destroyed. Eventually, Julia speaks again, her voice thoughtful. You know, before all this, the assembly saw us as useful but disposable, cheap reinforcements to throw at problems too costly for their own forces. And now, I ask? She glances toward the group of Korath officials still gathered near the command structure, their conversation quiet and serious. Now I think they're starting to realize reinforcements aren't the same as monsters, no matter how fiercely those reinforcements are willing to fight. Her words stay with me as the day continues, as recovery efforts stretch into evening, as reports slowly filter in confirming the swarm's full retreat from the surrounding sector. By the time night falls again over Kessia Outpost, quieter this time, calmer, I find myself reflecting on everything this single, brutal cycle of day and night has taught me. We came to this outpost as auxiliary support, small in number, viewed by our allies as useful but ultimately expendable. We leave it, or rather, we will eventually leave it, once repairs and investigations conclude, as something different entirely, not simply reinforcements answering a distress call, but a demonstration of exactly what humanity is willing to do when the numbers say retreat, and our answer remains simply no. The true monsters this galaxy holds, I have come to understand, are not always the creatures with claws and pulsing biological markings, moving in coordinated swarms through darkened tree lines. Sometimes the true monsters wear calm, careful voices, making cold calculations about acceptable loss, choosing convenient silence over difficult honesty. And sometimes, the difference between monster and hero comes down to nothing more than a single simple choice, made in the darkest hour of the longest night, to stay, to hold the line, and to never leave anyone behind, no matter what the cost. As I finally allow myself to rest, watching the stars emerge slowly over a battlefield, now quiet and still, I find myself thinking not of the horrors this night revealed, but of the 600 people who slept safely in shelter because a handful of exhausted, stubborn soldiers refused to let a doctrine of calculated sacrifice decide their fate. That, I decide, is a legacy worth carrying forward, long after this particular battle fades into memory, and long after the galaxy finally learns exactly what kind of reinforcements humanity truly sends when the call for help finally comes.